What's going on, everyone? Josh here from Hunt's Photo and Video. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another First Look Q&A session. Today, I'm joined by Jon, one of Sony's technical representatives for New England. Thank you so much for joining us, Jon.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So today is kind of a big day. We've got a lot to discuss, so let's just get right into it. Today, we'll be covering the brand new Sony Alpha 1, or the A1 for short, which is Sony's latest and probably one of the most impressive cameras that they have released to date. So I kind of want to start this session off by just asking the age-old question, who is this camera really designed for?
It's designed for professionals, whether they're videographers, commercial shooters, wildlife, any kind of video work. But a large number of our pre-orders are enthusiasts and hobbyists. So you could argue this camera is for everybody.
So this camera is... After the A7S III, this is the newest camera that they've released in the mirrorless body lineup for both, photo and video. What are the main differences between the Alpha 1 and the A7S III?
Well, the Alpha 1 is a fully and the most advanced still camera that you'd find out there. So there are definitely features that the S3 doesn't employ in terms of autofocus and features like 30 frames per second burst rate, but more importantly, 120 times per second we're calculating autofocus and auto exposure. The S3 does have the advantage for some of having a side-mounted LCD screen. The Alpha 1 has features like blackout-free flickerless shooting, lossless RAW, and of course it has a 50 megapixel stacked sensor. But there are a host of other differences that would take a lot of time to go through, to be honest.
That makes total sense. And we'll also have a link in the description below if anyone needs any more information about the Alpha 1 after we're done this Q&A session. So what are some of the average file sizes if you're shooting in maximum resolution with this camera? I know a lot of it's going to depend on the situation and the weather and all that type of stuff, but what are some of the average file sizes you can expect if you're shooting at the max resolution for stills?
Yeah, given the variables you mentioned, your subject and all of that, and then of course whether you're shooting an uncompressed RAW or not. So uncompressed RAW, I've seen files as large as about 120 megabytes. JPEGs are usually about 25 to 30, and then the compressed RAW come in at about 60 or so megabytes.
Gotcha. So that makes sense. Obviously for max resolution, you're going to be getting a lot of information there. So those file sizes, they don't surprise me too much. You did mention JPEG formats, and I know that it can shoot in JPEG, RAW, as well as the HEIF format. What is an HEIF or a HEIF file?
So the HEIF file, which is being utilized by Sony and Apple, so I think it's got a pretty good future. The HEIF file is twice the compression of JPEG, but with the equal quality of the best JPEGs out there.
Gotcha. So it's just a smaller version of what a JPEG would, more compressed, so the file sizes are just a little bit smaller. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it's twice the compression. Gotcha. without any quality loss.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Since we are talking a little bit more about the RAW formats, and I'll get more into the video, the 8K, the 4K. I know this camera has a dual card slot, one of them for the UHS-II SD cards, as well as one of them designated just for a CFExpress Type A card. Situationally, when would you use either? If you can give me any sort of indication on when you'd use one over the other?
Well, first of all, there are two card slots, but both card slots can accept either format, SD or CFExpress Type A. So most formats you're going to be able to utilize the SD card. You would want it to be SDXC and V60 or V90. V90 to be sure to have all the compatibility. So you would need the CFExpress Type A when recording XAVC-SI, 4K, 120p, or 240p.
Do you think you would need it necessarily if you're just going to be shooting, if you're going to be doing it for sports photography and stuff like that? You probably would want, if you're shooting max resolution in a high frame rate, do you think that would be another situation where you'd want to use the CFExpress Type A cards as well?
No, our fastest UHS-II cards are going to be fast enough to handle what the camera is going to give you.
So I did talk a little tiny bit about the 8K and 4K situations. I know that the 8K is kind of a big thing right now with some of the manufacturers, doing their own versions of an 8K sensor. What are the current overheating times? And again, I know this is all going to depend on situation, but what are the current, average overheat times when it comes to 8K shooting?
I think we're doing really well with this. We don't quote, as you mentioned, it's too variable, but we do talk about 30 minutes for 8K. And for the 4K, we really don't have a number. It's too dependent on the environment, and you're generally not going to have any issues with overheating with this camera.
That's good to know, because that has been an issue with some of the other cameras in the past. And even though 8K isn't as readily used as a lot of other resolutions, I think that it is going to be an important player coming up for video in the future here. So when it comes to stills shooting specifically, battery life, what are we talking when it comes to how many shots you can fire off using either the electronic viewfinder versus the LCD screen?
That's a good question. This camera will record about 430 shots using the electronic viewfinder and about 530 using the LCD. So yes, the electronic viewfinder is a little more power hungry. These numbers are using the CEPA standard, which are based on the mechanical shutter. If you are using our electronic shutter or silent shutter, your shot count is going to go much, much higher than that.
I had two other questions that were just kind of, brought to my attention by customers. One of them being battery. Is this going to maintain the same battery that we've been seeing from, most of the current generation Sony mirrorless cameras? Or is it going to be, are they engineering a new battery and or a grip for this camera?
The battery will remain the same. So you'll be able to continue using your Z batteries that we've been using for years now. And as far as the grip goes, this body is compatible with, I call it the 4 grip. It's the grip that is used with the 7R4 and the 9 Mark II.
Oh, okay. So if you had either of those generation cameras and had a grip, it would also just seamlessly fit onto the A1. Is that correct?
Correct.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. I feel like a lot of manufacturers these days are kind of, engineering new grips for each individual camera, but I'm glad to hear that. So that kind of just about does it for the questions that I really had. Is there anything else that we didn't cover right now that you want to bring up about the camera at all?
Well, I think I want to make sure that people are aware of the low light shooting capability of this camera. We're talking EV -4. So an aperture value of f/22, pretty amazing and quite capable in low light, of course. And then, of course, the roller, we do have an advancement in the rolling shutter effect. That rolling shutter effect is reduced by about 1.5 times as compared to the Alpha 9 II, which was the sort of the champ of rolling shutter control.
That's great. Yeah, I know that rolling shutter has been an issue for a lot of the mirrorless cameras in the past, so I'm glad that they're improving on that a little bit as time goes on. I know it's hard to eliminate it completely, but it's good that they're making attempts here. That's good to know.
Right, and there are actually a couple other things. We now can you can use flash photography in the silent shutter mode, which is the first, and the sync speed is 1/200th. And then regarding other sync speed news for mechanical shutter, we now have the world's fastest sync at 1/400th.
Wow. So truly this camera is going to be good for pretty much any professional level shooter that you'd have out there.
Exactly. So this is really, in a lot of ways, you can think of it as as a real flagship camera, because we have concept cameras like the R's for resolution, the S for light sensitivity and video, the 9 series for wildlife or any kind of action. But this improves on all of those. And we add things like big improvements in animal eye autofocus, human eye autofocus, and a new eye autofocus for birds. So yeah, this camera does it all.
Well, I, for one, cannot wait, especially being a Sony mirrorless shooter myself. I cannot wait to see what else this camera has in store. Thank you so much, Jon, for joining me today and letting me pester you with all these questions. I really greatly appreciate it, and I hope at some point we can do it again in the future.
Well, again, thanks for having me. And anytime you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you all for tuning in to another Hunt's First Look Q&A session on the Sony Alpha 1. There will be additional resources in the description below regarding this camera. There will also be a link for our website where this camera is now available for pre-order. Once again, thank you so much to Jon for joining me today. And as always, if you have any other questions regarding this camera specifically or anything else camera related, please do not hesitate to give us a call, send us an email, or stop by one of our 8 stores located around New England. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give us a like and subscribe so you never miss another upload. Visit huntsphotoandvideo.com for all of your camera needs now and in the future, and I will see you all on the next one.